Afternoon, everyone. I already see some attendees coming into Zoom. Just give it a minute for a couple more people to join, and then we can kick off. I'm already recognising a couple names from WIE in the attendee list.
I feel like the WIE attendees are going to be sick of me by the end of this week for the ones who joined the session yesterday too. We had a LinkedIn session for the participants at the Speak Up competition also with Convert. I promise you this is the last talk for this week.
You're done now.
I'm done for this week. No other talks, no other podcast this week. This is your final chance.
Okay, I think I will get started then. So welcome everyone. I'm Marcella from Convert. I am here to introduce our two fireside speakers today, both of who I know quite well, and you're in very safe hands with these two for this discussion because we're going to be talking about optimization and growth and aligning teams around it. So on the growth side of the ring, because Daphne did describe this as a showdown, but I don't think it's going to be that oppositional. We have Daphne Tideman. So Daphne is the founder of WIE. I work with her lots on, as she was just talking about, things related to that. But she is also the founder of Growth Waves, which is her consultancy. She's worked with over 100 companies, teaching them how to grow. And not only is she good at getting companies to grow, she's great at teaching other people how to do it because she's a mentor, speaker, and runs workshops on the subject. So, as I said, very knowledgeable. Then on the optimization side of the ring, we have Ruben. So Ruben is with online dialogue, but he also runs conversion ideas, and he's a consultant working in experimentation, strategy, and culture. He's done some of the best talks on actually understanding people when it comes to culture and running good programs, as well as the technical side, because people are just as important. So thank you both very much. I'll hand over to you guys, but I'm really looking forward to today's chat.
Cool. Thank you, Marcella.
Thanks so much for the great introduction. And we won't make it too much of a showdown. I've just been bullying Ruben the last weeks about it being one or the other, but the reality is that the two actually have a lot of overlap and definitely can add value to both sides. And that's what we'll also be looking at today. So just for everyone to get a general idea of like, how do we see these two? Like, what is the difference between experimentation and growth in terms of like approach, KPIs, and focus? Maybe you can explain that for everyone, Ruben.
Yeah, great. It's a great way to start. I think I already heard like I'm optimization, I'm experimentation. I haven't heard CRO yet. It's probably gonna come up in the next minute or so. But let's focus on experimentation. I think experimentation is a scientific approach of deciding what's best between two or more competing ideas. And I think that fits very well in product teams, in marketing teams, in growth teams, and in innovation teams, and all teams in organization. CROs then more related to the website to get more conversions. Whereas the growth, I think experimentation fits in growth, but growth is like broad, a lot broader than the CRO teams generally do. It's across the company to find how to boost growth for the organization.
Yeah, 100% and agree on that. I think, like you said, like with the CRO side, it is slightly more limited. It shouldn't be because I think like when we take it with the experimentation approach, it should be as broad as growth is because it's really this methodology that you can apply to different areas to really de-risk decisions. But often growth is, seen a bit broader, multiple disciplines. And we see with experimentation, I think it's a bit more often like just in the product or in the marketing team, or maybe an overlap of those two, versus with growth, it can come from very different areas, from like operational side of things where, maybe the typical experiments are a bit harder to run, but it doesn't mean it doesn't lead to the end result. And do you feel like the teams are different or the same? Like how do they vary?
I was just going to add that exactly. I think it really depends on the maturity of organization. Whereas in the beginning, you might see the growth teams. Then at some point, some CRO team will show up. But I think eventually the companies that are winning, and that's why this is also a very interesting topic, are the companies where everyone is focused on growth through experimentation. Those are the companies who are winning. Those are the companies who are growing. And growth and experimentation is within different teams, like again, the product teams, the marketing teams, the innovation teams. So I think it starts being different, but when organizations mature in this way of thinking, growth, experimentation, that's when it really starts winning. That's when it really starts growing, understanding more and more about the customer journey, about the customers, and increasing growth, as well as mitigating risk, of course, because experimentation is as important for growth, but also for not changing something on your digital products or your products that result in a great loss.
Yeah, agreed. I definitely see like the kind of like growth team definition being that early stage where often you don't have the same amount of data to run tests in the same way you would with a CRO team. You're just more limited in that, and it would make sense to maybe have a whole team on that. And everyone has basically has that role of growth, like you say. And then eventually, yeah, it does start to merge. And I agree with you. I think the best don't try to see it as like either or, but try to see like, yeah, how can they work together to basically grow the company faster, because that's what both teams are focused on in the end of the day.
Absolutely. I think that's also what CRO specialists can really learn from growth, because they're so focused on A/B testing, but there's so many other methods
Yeah.
to experiment and get to growth. And especially when it's moving towards product, getting bigger, then you need those quicker iterations. You need those quicker experiments, different channels, different parts of the organization to really boost that growth and make the right data-driven decisions.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like not all CRO specialists would be comfortable going into the email system and like analyzing what's going on there, or going and looking at the ads and looking at all these different areas, diving deep into the retention data of it. Like some are, I'm not saying, not trying to blanket say that every single one doesn't know how to do that, but more, I think like that's where like kind of this growth perspective is really valuable, because I always try to explain it. It's like I sit across the whole area. If you need someone purely just to optimize your website, go to a CRO specialist.
Yeah.
If you need someone purely to improve your ads, go to an ad specialist. But my strength is looking at all these different areas and understanding the interplay in the different metrics to understand, like, if you have a conversion problem, is it actually your website that is the issue? Or is it how you're sending people to the website and what's going on there? Is it different traffic sources and what's going on in each of those playing a role with it? Is it actually in terms of that we're not getting enough returning customers back, and or we're not doing a good enough job of actually building that relationship off the website as well? There's so many things that come into that play that can also play a role in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Or it's the value proposition. It can be
Yeah.
anything. So when I'm with clients and there's a CRO team, there's a marketing team, there's a retention team, I always try to get them together, because you want to get a complete picture of the needs, motivations of your customers,
Yeah.
and not just a tiny part on the website. You want to understand the whole journey to make better decisions for the
Yeah.
website than any other channel.
Yeah, and it's often when those are all like separated out that you see those issues occur. Like some of the most often things I get asked to do is just actually looking from it like front to end, and it just feels like I'm looking at chunks rather than just one journey of it. So I think it's really good that you try to get everyone together. And I think sometimes we almost mystify the idea of a growth team, but like for me, that's literally it. It's just getting these different people from different areas together, focused on the same goal.
Absolutely, and I see more and more companies understand this also with my work being experimentation consultant. Whereas first I would just the client would just ask, please do 20 A/B tests for me to optimize my website. It's now like, please help us learn how to focus on growth and experimentation throughout the whole
Yeah.
organization. And that makes much more
Yeah.
sense, because again, those companies are winning. So the combination of growth and experimentation is crucial.
Yeah, and the impact multiplies, because if everyone's thinking that experimentation approach and taking that kind of data-driven and customer-centric way of working, you can also have such a bigger impact. And it's not always as easy to measure and or as clean as like, with an A/B test, but it is still very impactful.
So besides all the good things, what are some challenges when growth and experimentation start working together, growth and CRO specialists? Because it's not all
Yeah.
good, of course.
Yeah, you're right. We sound like a bit like we're like, yeah, go work together, but
Yeah.
there are definitely challenges. So I would say the first one is that the classic kind of CRO approach of, running an experiment doesn't work for all areas. So when you're doing meta ads testing, if you want everything to be a precise A/B test, sure, you can set that up in Meta. Sure, there are cases where you do want to use the experiment feature of Meta or be very rigorous in testing different ads, usually in the very beginning when you're really using it as a way to learn about your value proposition. But at a certain point, you're going to be testing hundreds of ads. You can't wait for significance. And there's also like major monetization changes around like the packages you're offering that you can't always run for whatever reason as like an A/B test. And so I think one of the challenges is that experimenters have to let go of a certain like level of statistical confidence, especially also with early startups, but even at later stages, like I say, if you're trying to run hundreds of ads, some ads you're going to turn off after, just a few pounds of spend. They aren't going to be significant, but you have to trust that the AI of the platform is actually using the data of your customer to drive those decisions. And it looks very different. So I think like letting go of like this perfect kind of A/B test, like setup of like, kind of the depth and approach, and realizing that there's cases where you run experiments, there's cases where things are like minor optimizations that you might not document in the same way. That's one of them. Curious to hear your thoughts on that, because there's another one I'm also thinking of, but I first want to hear if you've ever seen this happen.
Now, of course, this happens, and I agree with this. This is indeed a challenge. Resulting from it is also, I think, speed.
Yeah,
Sometimes you just want to learn, test
yeah,
assumptions quickly, validate stuff
yeah,
quickly, not in the best statistical method, but
yeah,
just quick iterations, quick experiments to at least make some sort of decision to go in the right direction. And from there, you can run eventually bigger experiments. But speed is crucial. And an A/B
yeah,
test can take a long time, especially if you don't have a lot of data. A B test runs for 4 weeks, maybe. Then you need an analyst to analyze it for 1 week. If it not ends at the bottom of the backlog and doesn't have time for the next month or so, you need to prepare the A/B test, the research. So one A/B test could easily take up 2 months. And if you want to grow quickly, yeah, you need speed. And that's when
yeah.
other methods of validation could be more beneficial. And that's, I think the growth team has that nailed down most of the time.
Yeah, I think it gets a bit of a bad rep of being like too hacky and quick wins, and that's not what I see growth as. Like, I never use the term growth hacking anymore, and kind of like hate that I ever did, in all honesty. But hey, I was young and naive. Um, but like, I don't think it's about like, and I think that's the excuse that experimenters then use, like, oh, it's not about quick hacks and quick wins. But like you say, there's moments where you need speed. If we look at like, there's this concept of like blitzscaling, like where you're like basically letting go of certain things to be able to go faster, you're letting things intentionally break. I think there's moments where that's okay and that we have to be comfortable with that. And like I said, it's not even just like smaller tests, it's also doing these bigger changes. And I think where growth can then learn from experimentation, it's like making sure that they are having that research behind it, that it isn't just based on like a quick win, but really thought through. And the other thing where I think it also we can learn more from it is like, even if we are going fast with these things, even though there's things we can't test, making sure that for the major things that we are testing and exploring, that we get better documentation. Because
Yeah.
I started out like being kind of like in the experimentation world a bit more just because there was no growth kind of things to follow. And so I always thought originally like, oh, this approach to being very structured and like, tracking your experiments and all of this is normal also for growth. And then I saw the growth world and I was like, no, most people are not doing this. And I think like that's something where, growth needs to learn more from experimentation of like, okay, not that we document everything, we let go like what are the things that are like faster, quicker things that we need to do, like smaller things. Like if you're trying to document learnings from 100 ads, like, yeah, you can use AI to speed that up, but it also might not be valuable at that level anymore because you're barely going to be looking at that much data. You're going to be more like constantly iterating on it. But in the other areas where we are doing these bigger tests, making sure that we are following kind of that strict documentation, that we're not retesting the same thing over and over again, because otherwise you always end up like wondering like half a year, like, oh, why didn't we do that? Oh yeah, I can't remember. I think it didn't work. And you waste so much time trying to, go through like, your Google Drive, your Notion, trying to find this information.
Yeah, and of
I
course, not just that, not rerunning experiments. It's also because that's also the point I had. I think experiments are generally a little
Yeah.
bit better in learnings, which then
Yeah.
need to be documented, but it's for the sake of learnings and building a knowledge database.
Yeah.
And maybe that's because A/B testing is already a bit more scientific. So we have more of the learning top of mind than maybe some growth teams. I think should happen in all teams. So you're building a knowledge database, which adds value and that really adds the competitive advantage, and that helps you throughout the whole organization understand the customers much more, and therefore improve the product, improve innovation, and improve marketing as well.
I think your point on documentation is a really interesting one because it's one of these things that's seen as something that takes extra time at the start, but actually you're both kind of touching on the idea that in the long run you don't end up retesting things. But my question there is when people or a company that you work with aren't used to that rigid documentation, so they don't yet know the value of it, how do you explain that to them to get them to make that initial time investment of taking the time to document things in a more structured way?
Good question. I think first it's learning, right? If some marketing growth team has a really good winner on a Google Ads headline, for instance, the CRO team must know it because they want to use that information on their landing pages. And over time, as mentioned, you learn much more about what works, what tactics work, what strategies work, where in the customer journey, what are the needs, motivations. Experimentation is not only for growth; it's also for learning. Um, and yeah, at one point, after a company did like 100 experiments, and you asked them, "What did you actually learn? What experiments are related to each other?" They are clueless, and that's when they understand, like, okay, maybe we should start documenting and creating a knowledge database. It's also, if you do it in the proper way with proper research, defining the biggest opportunities like customer problems. Um, Brainstorm solutions. You want to test those solutions several times and learn what solution best matches which opportunity and what new opportunities arise. But you can only do that through learning and only through proper documentation.
Yeah, I think the other thing is building it up step by step to get them more comfortable with it. I think sometimes if you go like this is the end way to do it, it becomes a lot. So I often start with just documenting the things that have been run, keeping it very simple, not too many fields, simplifying it down. And then from there, basically step by step building up that kind of like process. So once they get used to doing that, they see the value. We've had a few meetings where we've gone back, looked at things, used them to feed into next experiments. We're like, oh, this is helpful. Then we start like expanding it, like, oh, this context might be helpful to add. Oh, it would be actually helpful to also document the backlog. Oh, should we also score because we're getting lots of ideas now in the backlog? And just building it up step by step versus like having this huge system that they suddenly need to get used to. And to also answer Tim's question, I'll just put that on the live answer so we have that noted. So the way I would suggest, and curious if Ruben, if you have a different approach to this, of making sure that we're aligning learnings over teams, because that's Tim's question, is like, what's the best practice for aligning learnings over teams? Is I personally think like this documentation shouldn't be, this is the growth documentation, this is the experimentation documentation. I think it should be one bigger place where it's all kept. But I think there should be an easy way to adjust what you're filling in depending on what you're actually documenting. So it doesn't make sense for, something that's, if you're running an experiment around like the post-purchase flow in email, some of the things that you would document for an A/B test will be completely different. And some of the things that you want to have in there will be different. So making sure that you can adjust it according to what information is relevant makes that easy so that they can just filter down, like, this is what I'm documenting, this is what I'll put in there, and that we can adjust it. But I find that if you've got all the learnings in one place, that really helps bring the team together. And the other thing that I find really helps personally in this is if you also make sure that you're then, like what Ruben said, getting everyone in one room and you're presenting the learnings in one place, because then we can also align and share those learnings, but also talk about them. Because often then you start saying like, oh yeah, and this. Oh, couldn't we use this for this? And you see also that value spark of sharing these learnings across the team. I don't know if you have anything to add, Ruben.
No, I fully agree. When you want to when you want people to perform a certain behavior, make it as easy as possible, because if it's really difficult, then they're not going to do it. So indeed, adapt the templates to the kind of experiments and not have someone run an email experiment and have to fill out everything that's in an A/B test experiment. That makes no sense. So make it indeed as easy as possible. But do make it possible and do document in one place. Again, build up knowledge. It's vital. While an experiment result might only hold for 6 months, building up a knowledge database has value for a very long time. And especially now, with AI, companies that document learnings properly have an additional advantage because they can chat to an AI, they can easily find learnings, they can help come up, summarize learnings. So companies that are documenting learnings are winning. And learnings are really what the results say about the behavior and needs, motivations of our customers, and not a summary of your results.
Yeah. Yeah, I always split them out into two separate columns, like what's the results and what's the learnings, because otherwise you just end up with what you say, like some figures added in, but it's like, okay, but now what? Like, so what?
Yeah.
There was another question that I think relates well to this topic before we move on. And that's from Sherilyn, which is how do you get other teams, so e-commerce marketing, to see testing as a way to identify what's worth their effort and not just another item on the to-do list? I feel like you've talked about this before, Ruben, so that's why I wanted to make sure I asked this one to you.
That it's really different for each team, for each organization. The easiest answer, if a manager, a hiring manager, director sets the goal of validating ideas and running experiments, then they see it as worth efforts to run experiments because that will get them the end of year bonus. If director set the challenge, the goal to release as many features as possible within a year, then testing is going to be very hard. So whenever there's an outcome-driven goal, so instead of output, which is features launch, outcome is more how do you add value to the customer, to the company, to the customer. That's when experimentation is crucial because you don't know what solution works best. A solution might completely decrease the main KPI or help you increase the KPI, but you only know it when you start experimenting. And as experimenters, your goal is to help your colleagues achieve their goals through your experiments. That's when they start to see value. You can ask them for ideas, you can involve them in your process, but help them achieve their goals with your experiments so they start seeing their value.
Yeah. I think often when people also see it as another to do, it's because they're too busy. And so what I try to help them also see is that like testing drives focus. We're narrowing down what we're testing about. We're narrowing down what we're going to focus on. But not only that, we don't have to then do everything in the biggest way possible. And so we can actually do less, but more like considerate of like, hey, what's working, what's not, and following up based on what's been working. So trying to also help them see it like this isn't another thing. This is actually going to reduce your workload, because rather than throw spaghetti at the wall and hope something sticks and we have enough spaghetti at the end of the quarter, we're going to be much more precise into it in terms of what is and isn't working. And that's going to help us get less into that, oh, we need to do more and more and more to grow, like you say, like there's endless features, but just be very like conscious of like, hey, we don't have to roll out this huge thing. We can do it in a smaller way. I will say the other thing that we haven't talked about, but is worth mentioning, marketing has two sides to it. And one of the sides, brand, I would really try to be careful of pushing too much testing there, because I think there sometimes testing can hold brand back, because you can't run a test sometimes in terms of brand marketing. It is a bigger thing that you need to do. You do need to invest and take bigger risks. And so when you try to use like the testing process and that, you can stifle creativity. So another way to kind of get them on board with it is also showing like where they do and don't use it, and being also really careful to allow brand to have its own process and its own approach so that you're not stifling creativity, because that can be another reason why they're not as keen.
Yeah, indeed. The brand has different goals, so always focus on the goals of your colleagues. And as you mentioned, experimentation, growth experiments eventually save a lot of time. Instead of launching a feature that takes 8 months to build, make it very small. If you don't know what to launch, then first do lots of research, small iterations, quick experiments to discover what you should launch and how you should launch it. So it's going to save you loads of time instead of just building some big feature that at the end might not work at all.
Exactly. Oh, Cool. So those were the questions. Slight detour, but I found it really important that if anyone is sharing questions, that we do take the time for those and to make sure we're also covering what you guys want to learn. So feel free to ask away still.
Yeah, questions are fun. So keep asking questions.
Just really challenge Ruben. Just give him a really hard one, please, guys. Yes. Oh, go ahead.
I think up next we had a really interesting question that Ruben wanted to ask Daphne.
Wait, sorry, I didn't miss the first part of the sentence.
The question that we had on evolving with the rise of zero-click and AI.
Yeah. That's of course a question that's popping up a lot lately. Is the customer's journey are evolving? We have the rise of zero clicks. I mean, SEO specialists, their job changed completely already. We have AI. We have Gen Z who use TikTok as a search. They're more into inspiration. So with this customer journeys evolving, how can growth teams adapt their approach, their experimentation approach, and how can experimenters help them with that?
Yeah. So to start with kind of the zero click and the off platform conversions, I think we've sometimes made it seem like this is suddenly something new, but the reality is like funnels have never been linear. Like we would love to believe someone sees an ad, goes on there, we've been able to attribute them always perfectly. But the reality is that it can sometimes take years before someone buys. They've often seen multiple touch points offline, online. It's always been a case where this has been trickier. So we've always had less than ideal data. I just think we like to always complain when it gets worse because we're already like, it's not great. And now it's gone worse. And now it's gone worse. And then there's these big like changes that impact it where we're just like, okay, yeah, now it's even worse. What are we going to do? And so I think how we kind of adapt around this is just being very conscious of these limitations and how we measure success, and really also try to mitigate the risk where we can in terms of, like, for example, if you've got an ecom brand, I know it's super old fashioned, but just have a post-purchase survey of like, how did you hear about us? Yeah. Almost every single app I work with does this in their flow at some point. And, we can be like, oh, it feels old fashioned, or that's not going to be precise either. But no, if we ask like, how did you first hear about us? If we have a bit more data on the last click where possible side of it, we can start to build a picture of it and just kind of be conscious of like, hey, what are we seeing? And then what I think, like, what we can then learn from experimenters, sorry, from this is just like in getting better and then defining what is actually the metric of success and what are the guardrail metrics that we need to think about. And then also, because we don't always have that confidence and that 100% with like, has this actually had a lift or not, treating it as a roadmap of tests rather than single tests. I think growth sometimes leans too much like single separate tests. And like I said, like I've never approached it like that because I've always looked to experimenters of like how I learn. But I've seen like too often it's been like a load of random tests versus actually having like these themes and these different areas that we're testing around, and then using a roadmap of tests to go around that, because then we can also be more confident in like, did this make a difference or not, in terms of that. And I think the flip side where growth then can help experimenters with this is like, if we aren't confident always in the data, how can we use like the top of the funnel to also test things like messaging, visuals, pricing? How can we use things like email around that versus just testing things on the website?
Yeah, and I think what you said as well, that measuring success, that's when we can both have a really good discussion there, because it is getting more difficult, I believe, when for CRO teams, the question like how should we balance inspiration and conversion on the website, that's killing, because we always measure simple sales, conversions, purchase, add to carts, but that's not necessarily what's coming from inspiration in the first place. So I think that conversation is a very good conversation to have with the growth team, and together, and of course with your stakeholders, to gotta come up with how are we going to measure success going forth based on the strategy of the organization, based on these new evolving customer journeys.
Yeah, for sure. And then, I think the AI side, to make sure we also touch on that, everyone's favorite topic these days.
We almost had a webinar without mentioning AI.
God forbid. So I think like how it's changing things is in terms of like the customer journey, like we see it in how people are searching and see it like people are using it more as a search function. So it is impacting also where people are finding it, how we're also trying to make sure that we're not just ranking in terms of like, organic search, but also in terms of like search engines. AEO is a term that is on the rise constantly. So I think that it plays a role in, but I also think it also can play a role in actually understanding those journeys. So not just like how it's changing the journeys, but for example, we see also a rise in synthetic users. I'm not saying that they can replace all, actual user interviews by any means, but I think it can really help us to understand a bit better and have them top of mind and almost make sure that that customer has a voice in the room for like smaller moments where we're not sure, feeding things back, testing things, like running, ad concepts, copy by them to see like, hey, what's the initial thought on that? We still need to test it, but it's a good way to that kind of improve those experiments. And the other place it plays a role in those customer journeys is we can personalize far better. I think for so many years, what we've called personalization for most websites who aren't like, huge is just actually segmentation, because we just haven't had the data or the scale to be able to do proper personalization. And I think that's starting to change now that we can actually personalize better to their journeys, even at smaller stages, thanks to the rise of tools that allow to do that.
Yeah, and I'm just looking forward to implement AI everywhere in the process to make things more efficient, less error prone. And what I'm also really looking forward, and I think that's going to be an important topic next year, is start planning to run a B test for agents. And I think by the end of next year, or maybe a little further, we are now, when we do an A/B test, our standard segment is mobile desktop. I think at one point we have mobile desktop users and agents. Um, I'm very
Oh,
curious to see,
interesting.
very excited to see what's going to happen there and see the growth. So yeah, AI is definitely gonna help optimize the process, make it less error prone, faster insights, but still treat it as an assistant and not as the absolute truth. And I'm very much interested in seeing what we'll do on our platforms as well.
Yeah. And I think like even though it is speeding things up, I do think that's where experimenters can help growth, and just more thing in general is like there's a place for speeding up and there's a place for slowing down. And I think like even though AI will speed up a lot of the way we can do things, sometimes it's almost too easy to implement AI for things without actually being conscious of like what's the data
Yeah,
to back this up, what's the research behind this. So
yeah,
I think that's
yeah,
something that growth people can also learn from experimenters, is making sure that even if we are speeding up things, that there is still clear hypotheses and structured learnings in place. I'm
yeah. Not
conscious.
implementing AI for the sake of AI. That.
Oh gosh, worst nightmare. I'm conscious. I think we're through time, Marcella, but maybe we can answer one last
Yes.
question.
We are almost there. An interesting one from Tim in Q&A as well that I think we could cover fairly briefly is he said, love to think about test agents as a test category. How would an experiment for that look?
Yeah,
Ruben, you brought this on yourself.
yeah. We're gonna learn next year. I don't know yet. I'm not the AI specialist. We're gonna learn. Gonna learn how agents scroll our website, how they are purchasing from our website, and we're gonna learn how to make it easier for them. But the first thing is we have to look at data analysts to help us track them before we
I, th
can conclude
I thought
anything.
that one would be a brief one to answer because it's basically we don't know yet.
Exactly.
One of the interesting things is agents respond to a lot of the changes that we should have already made on our websites to improve accessibility. So that would be my top one there. Just one final question for you guys, and it's from Trina from Convert. She wants to know, and I think this is a really important one, for an optimizer that's looking to work together with growth teams, what would be the first couple value adds, things that they could bring along to the growth team that would really kick off that mutually beneficial collaboration?
I think it's getting working together, get a complete picture of the entire customer journey, learning from each other's experiments, and the process, and documentation. Don't forget documentation.
Yeah, I think a quick value add is already bringing those learnings that they already have to the table and sharing what they've already learned. Because I think like so often we have all these learnings separately and just already showing like, hey, I'm not here to, as much as I think optimizers can help growth people be more documented, more structured in their approach. I think leading with that is hard because no one actually like thinks like, oh, I wish I would be documenting more. Like no one like really like wakes up in the middle of the night and hopes for that. But like, you know, better understanding of their customers, seeing actually data that like they can be confident in. I think that just adds so much value. So coming with everything that they've learned and bringing that together, like Ruben says, to also understand that full customer journey, I think that actually starts a really good place. And then also trying to understand like what is the growth team focused on, like what is the like over, so you've got the company wide North Star metric, and then you've got the focus points, like what are the levers
Yeah.
in terms of growth that they're focused on this quarter, and how can they help each other to learn more and improve those. So if it is first to second order rate, what are maybe the things that the optimizers have learned already from the website that drives that? What does the growth team learn? What are things that we could be doing maybe even on the website to improve like the quality of those first orders to get people to order again? I think then you see the value of like, hey, we're working together to one goal.
I think that's
Yeah.
a really important point, understanding what they're working towards and then trying to help them. And it goes back to something that Ruben said earlier that I've actually written down, which I loved, was your job is to help your colleagues achieve their goals with your experiments. And I think that's like a really good way to sum up everything that we've been talking about today about collaboration. Any final thoughts before we leave, guys?
Yeah, I think like based also on your last question, I think growth and experimentation working together is not a nice to have anymore. It's a must. Because again, coming back to what we said in the beginning, companies focusing on growth through experimentation throughout every team and organization, those are the ones who are winning. Those will also first figure out how to cope with AI on their website, how to test for agents, how to go about with zero clicks, how to sell to Gen Z, how to balance inspiration and conversion. So it's actually a must. And the companies that understand this are the ones who are growing.
Yeah, I can't beat that. He's one.
Took the words out of your mouth. Well,
Yeah,
thank you
no,
both
I agree
so much
100%. Thank
for
you so
coming
much
on
for having me.
today. And thank you for all of our attendees. You had some great questions as well. And if you have any further questions, you can leave a comment on the LinkedIn Live event. And I'm sure Daphne and Ruben will take some time to come back to you. But yeah, thanks again, guys. This was really interesting. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much for
everyone.
joining.